So we saw how complicated the emergency department is in the last talk. How do we approach this complicated system? We now understand, I think a little better, I hope, how complicated it is and how it's not just a simple system that we have to control. But how do we approach this? How do we measure it? And how do we staff it? Okay. Well, this is an old thermostat. Do you have these here? Now here's one. This is a modern thermostat, right? Staffing is what I call a thermostat topic. The thermostat is what controls the temperature in the room. And a tiny little change in the thermostat, and this is an old one, a tiny little rotation, makes it hotter in the room and everybody feels it. And a tiny little rotation the other way, 2 degrees the other way, everyone in the room feels it. So staffing is like that. If you get it right, it affects everything you do in the emergency department. And if you get it wrong, it affects everything you do in the emergency department. There are a couple other thermostat topics. Staffing is one of them. Another one is design. We're going to talk about that right afterwards, okay? But what really controls the emergency department? This thermostat idea, staffing is really important. Your performance is what comes out of all the stuff that you do, all the training, all the personnel, all the equipment. You can put that all together and you get something called performance. Your performance is one of the biggest determinants of performance is staffing. So we'll talk to you about how do you actually do staffing. Okay, well, one of the things to focus on is the people, right? The people. Which type of people do you have? You have doctors, you have nurses, you have students, you have techs. Are these doctors, are they first-year doctors? Are they house officers? Are they registrars? Are they all 10-year faculty? If they're faculty, are they faculty orthopedists? Or are they faculty anesthesiologists or anesthetists? And so we have to know who are the people, all right? And how many do we have? The other is the place. Where is it that we're working? Every ER is not the same. Turns out they're mostly the same. 60, 70% of the problems that you have in your ER, 70 or 80%, are the problems that he has at his ER. And 70% of those are the same as the ones that you have, and 60, 70% are the same that we have. And so if we figured out how to do something, it might make sense for you to look at some of those solutions, and vice versa. If you figured out how to take care of 2 or 3 problems that we haven't figured out yet, it really helps us to figure out what's going on in emergency departments in the other parts of the world, because it really is a back and forth. It's not the well-established systems that are giving direction to everybody around the world. It's really a back and forth. And so you get that from studying the place, because the patients are similar to each other, but they're not exactly the same. The cultures are not exactly the same. The languages are not the same. The traditions are not the same. The medicines are not the same. The finances are not the same. They're similar, but they're not the same. And then the performance. What do you actually get out of putting the people together in that place? Now this PPP I borrowed from our friend Mahesh Joshi, who teaches courses in India about emergency department administration management. So I just want to acknowledge that I really like this concept of breaking staffing down into these people, place, and performance. And the people are, what kind of training do they have? What kind of staffing patterns are you going to have? So when do the people come in? You come in for 1 hour a day? You come in for 24 hours a day? How many days a week? What about overnight? What about weekends? What about holidays? And if the doctors are there, how many nurses do you have there? And how do you figure that out? That's a key point, which we'll spend a lot of time talking about. And then other things like faculty development. If you have people at a certain level, what are you doing to increase their level? What are you doing to stimulate them, to keep them interested, to keep them from leaving? What are you doing to give them a career opportunity so that they stay here, so that they train the next people? You really need to have faculty development as part of your program, even if you don't have a training program like residence. program or a nursing program where you're training. You have to have faculty development opportunities for your own faculty, otherwise they get bored and leave. So how do you do that? And then what about training in administration and management? It's one thing to train a nurse to become an emergency nurse. It's another thing to train the emergency nurse to be an emergency nurse manager. Those are different skills. So that's people. Place is really the design, and we'll spend the next hour talking about design after I'm done talking about staffing. You can do more with design than you can with training almost. Design really affects your performance, but we'll get to that, okay? Is the place designed to be an ER? Is it designed to be today's ER? Just because it was state-of-the-art when it was built 20 years ago doesn't mean that it still applies to today's technology, to our patients, to our hospital, to our training, to our education. We can do a lot more now at the bedside than we used to be able to do. So maybe the design from 20 years ago isn't applicable anymore. So we'll get more into that when we talk about design. What about the environment itself? What kind of equipment do you have? And then other things like hospitals, fortunately, are investing a lot more in the front door, which is the ER. The front door to the healthcare system, the front door to the hospital is the ER. So if you have brand new MRI and brand new CAT scan and functional MRI and intracardiac ultrasound and neurosurgery, but your ER is from 25 years ago, well then that shows you what your hospital thinks about emergency. So fortunately, a lot of healthcare systems and hospitals are investing in their ER and turning them into modern emergency departments, and that really changes the way we function. And so that's place. And then performance is operations. What are we doing inside these four walls? Tomorrow I'll talk about 20 little things that you can do in your ER that can make the performance improve. We saw from the earlier talk that the ER is like a system. It has 1,000 variables, and each variable is connected to 900 other variables. So that when you change one thing, the whole system kind of responds. Kind of like pushing into a balloon, it bulges out somewhere else. A complicated system is listening to everything on every level, and it compensates for changes. And operations are like that. When you put in a new triage system, it affects the laboratory system, and it affects everything else because they're all connected. And so the answer is, what is the one thing you can do to fix your ER? There isn't one thing. But there are about 20 little things. And those 20 little things all kind of add up to then give you a functioning ER as opposed to a non-functioning ER. And tomorrow we'll spend good detail for about 2 hours talking about that, hour and a half. What are those, some of those 20 things that you can do? And that's operations. And then the outcomes. The outcome for us shouldn't be based on numbers or based on interim measurements, but the outcome really should be that we're taking care of emergency patients so that people are alive or they're functional. We decrease morbidity, we decrease mortality, we're making them more fully functional so that they ultimately can go back home. Do we actually measure that? No, not that often. But that should be our real outcome. And you can break that into subcategories also. Value is, what is it you're offering for your hospital? We offer a huge value to our hospital. Okay, we diagnose, when we're operating well, we diagnose most of the major emergencies today instead of tomorrow or next week. We catch the operative fractures now as opposed to sending them home and having the patient come back 3 months from now as a disability. We're catching the stroke now instead of tomorrow or the next day. We're putting people in the right slots to go to their care and follow-up that ultimately maybe they wouldn't get if we weren't there. So that's a huge value. Okay, so if we can tell our administrators, maybe we have to spend more on the ER than what we're spending now. So if you spend, let's say, twice as much as on the ER, they say, oh, twice as much. But if you show them, by spending twice as much on the front door, we can save 8 or 10 times as much in the hospital. Because now those patients are staying in the hospital for a week instead of for 2 weeks. And now they're staying in the ICU for 2 weeks instead of 5 weeks. that actually turns into savings in value for the hospital. And of course, the patients benefit from that too. And that improvement, we want to continuously measure what we're doing in order to continuously improve. If you don't measure it, you can't improve on it. You have no real idea of what's going on.